Hi, I'm Dan Isenberg, and I'm very happy to be presenting to you and anything that I can do to help stimulate entrepreneurial growth in regions around the world. I'm happy to support. In order to comment about stakeholder engagement and how important that is, I would need first to get conceptual just for hopefully 30 or 40 seconds. So the first sort of conceptual element of scale-up ecosystem projects is what I call the scale-up purpose. Why are we doing this? And as you'll see, different stakeholders do it for different purposes. So what's the unifying purpose? And I think it's very useful to have what I call the scale-up purpose be agreed on. And that is to create the environment and the capability for more and more local firms to grow more and more rapidly. That's the scale-up purpose, more and more local firms growing more and more rapidly. Now, in order to do that, there needs to be a process. And the process consists of four what I call pillars. One is you have to show that growth can happen. And when I talk about growth, I am very molecular. Getting a new customer is growth. Hiring a new employee is growth. Getting new resources to grow is growth. So I think it's really critical to build up from that very molecular level. And you get millions and millions or billions of these little growth molecules, let's say, you will have regions that grow and provide benefits, broad-based benefits. So the four pillars are to demonstrate that growth can happen. Secondly, to communicate that growth so that it inspires and has influence around the region. And the third is to engage various stakeholders, a broad range of stakeholders, and we'll come back to this, in supporting that growth and in benefiting that growth. And then the fourth pillar is creating a very small team of 4, 5, 6 people that are trained to sort of keep the ball rolling. And that's enough of a team, even in a pretty big region of 1 million or 2 million people, believe it or not. In fact, if it takes too much of a team, then there's something wrong. So let me come back to stakeholder engagement and talk about why this is so critical and how that needs to happen. We've actually seen this happening in a project that we conducted in a city in Colombia called Manizales. It's a normal city, normal special things, and normal problems as well. And over about 10 years, we revolutionized that city in many ways using this methodology. And in fact, the methodology developed in that context, but we're also applying it to a country called Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island country in the Caribbean of about 1 million people. And that's happening there as well. And we've done this in other places. So now I'll talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement. And what do we mean by stakeholders? I mean a broad base of stakeholders, whether it's from the government, whether it's from large corporations that are local or have some local presence, whether it's universities or colleges or research institutes or high schools, whether it's banks or other kinds of financial institutions, whether it's the media, whether it's, of course, policymakers. And then there are various organizations that have a mission to create growth, the NGOs and the other organizations such as chambers of commerce. So that's a pretty broad view of who the stakeholders are. So the first question is, why should they be involved? Why should they support this kind of project? And I think the reason is that it creates broad benefits for them that are unique benefits. So, for example, banks will develop companies or support companies that are more responsible in handling their finance and paying back their loans. So the banks can see this as a business development exercise. We've also seen, by the way, in Bank Colombia, which is a large bank in Latin America, grown out of Colombia, they also used their involvement in the project to develop an entirely new program internal to the bank on entrepreneurship. So that's, for example, banks. Electrical utilities, just as another example. In Manizales Mas, the large regional electric utility has become involved in order to create better ways for consumers to consume electricity responsibly, new ways of generating electricity, new ways of distributing that electricity. And so this has really had an impact on innovation in Czech, the electrical utility. The universities, for example, have benefited by creating new courses, a new culture of pragmatic education. They've written books, conducted new research, brought in new students from overseas, and they've created an entirely new program in entrepreneurship that spans across local universities that in the past would simply compete with each other. And that's what I mean by a culture of collaboration. A large manufacturer of coffee and cocoa has used the methodology of scale-up ecosystems in order to train micro enterprises, small farmers that grow the cocoa in remote and poor regions and make them more responsible suppliers. The chambers of commerce have used the program in order to create new programming for their clients and to bring more value to their own programs. So this is just an example. These are just examples of how the engagement in Manizales Mas or in any scale-up ecosystem project by a broad base of stakeholders benefits those stakeholders. Usually we think about, oh, by the way, the government gets jobs and they also get taxes paid, increased taxes, and they get national and international recognition that they never got before. And these are some of the things that the political leaders like. So usually we talk about engaging stakeholders by what the stakeholders should do. I like starting the process by understanding what the stakeholders can benefit, because of course, many leaders of these organizations, they want to benefit their communities, but it's much more sticky and much more rich and beneficial if they understand that this is a way for them to get unique benefits. So how to be engaged? Well, there are many ways. Once you create the organization, you create the facts of growth, you create the programs of various kinds, there is just no end to the way that stakeholders can become engaged. They can become engaged in providing special knowledge. They can get engaged by providing, for example, the banks providing fast tracking of loans to the companies that have proven they can use those loans, or the credit facilities more responsibly. The universities can get involved, of course, by providing faculty and providing students and interns to companies to help them conduct special projects. So there's really no end to the way that the various stakeholders can get involved and can support. Of course, I think it's important for them to provide tangible financial support as well. Two secrets, and then I'll end my short presentation, of the success, I think, of these scale-up ecosystem projects. And again, drawing on our experience in Manizales and now in Trinidad and Tobago. One is that Manizales Mas and Scale-Up Trinidad and Tobago, they have never incorporated as organizations. I know that may sound kind of paradoxical, but the fact that they remain unincorporated, in other words, there's no legal entity called Manizales Mas. I think that's part of the secret sauce that we discovered, because by not being a legal entity, you actually become permeable or available to everybody. Anybody can get involved because there's no members or non-members. And so, for example, in Manizales Mas, there are now well over 400 individual people who are engaged in Manizales Mas from many different, most of them volunteers. They have a small team that gets a salary, but the hundreds of people are volunteers in various ways. And they do that because they think this project is theirs. So that's, I think, one of the secret sauces. And another one is all of the funding. Until very late in the project, all the funding came from local sources. And I think this is really important because it creates a sense of responsibility. It creates let's say, an immediacy or an urgency of engagement. And it also forces the organizations to continually ask, how am I benefiting, and how is this project benefiting me or us? Well, I'll leave right there with a few thoughts about stakeholder engagement. Again, to summarize, it starts with the stakeholders benefiting in unique ways from this more and more local firms growing more and more rapidly. And it involves the stakeholders of various kinds, a broad base of stakeholders engaging in ways that make sense for them. Good luck. I'm really excited to be able to help in some way, and I wish you success.